All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Michael Parrish. I'm the Senior Vice President of Client Development here at Halo Therapy Solutions. And I wanted to just welcome everybody who's going to either tune in now, and most of you I know are going to be seeing this after this event. I just want to welcome you, and we appreciate you tuning in, whether now or later. And real quick announcement, just like yesterday. And by the way, I have to off the top just apologize to Sammy Ibrahim. He tried to let me know that there was a little bit of feedback, but I didn't have my headsets in, and since it was our first event, there was a little bit of some echo. So just so everybody knows, we realized that, and obviously I've rectified it now. But quick announcement, as I mentioned yesterday, our company Halo Therapy Solutions is going to be in at FIBO Arabia, which is in Riyadh, and we will have a booth. We'll have two Halo Reds there. The Halo Red is the only patented full immersion red light therapy and halo therapy integration in the world. It's a beautiful tempered glass booth. The reason it's patented is because red light is interacting with kinetically active dry salt. So respiratory cleanse, skin detox, and gold standard red light therapy. So we'll be there. Come say hi if you happen to be going out to FIBO Arabia. So before I introduce Dr. Jonathan Mike, and I have to say that I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on. I just wanted to give a little bit of my background that most people or many people may not know because you can only put so many things that you've done professionally on LinkedIn before it gets a little too jumbled. But sports performance, physical performance, capability, excellence with any particular physical activity, it's always been a passion of mine that dates back to playing high level soccer when I was a young kid, and then from there becoming a full contact kickboxer. When, for me anyway, being a kickboxer taught me a lot of things. One of those elements that it taught me was you're very vulnerable if you're not operating at a level of physical excellence and capability. And that awareness of my vulnerability is what propelled me to really understand how to manipulate my body and to train correctly and to stay focused and to be locked in and to balance all of the aspects of being able to perform flexibility, strength, precision, focus, you name it. It was all important. And even recovery, even at that stage way back then, was really important. Then as I fast forward and I get into the special warfare training that I was in and putting our bodies through the rigors of training, Hell Week at basic underwater demolition SEAL training, and then pool comp. And even though that was cut short due to not being able to clear my ears, that 10 months that I spent at the Naval Special Warfare Center set a foundation for further dialing in how important it is to be creative and continue to think about the mind body connection and find out ways to reach higher levels of physical capability. And then from there get into being a police officer and how incredibly important it was to be able to perform physically. And now looking back during what happened in the streets of Baltimore, the many times that I was fighting over someone's gun or knife or chasing someone down and then having to have the skill and the dexterity and the capacity, the respiratory capacity to still operate at a high level once you got to them. All of those things, the physical capabilities that we have as humans and those of us that are dedicated to sports, there's many professional athletes that are in our networks. It's always been a passion of mine. And moreover, I'm passionate and excited about the professionals in the industry that are out there helping people achieve their best. And with that in mind, I couldn't think of any better guest to have on than Dr. Jonathan Mike. He's a sports performance expert and international speaker. Speaking of FIBO, he has spoken there before. He most likely is going to be speaking at the upcoming HFA event. Is that San Diego? Yep, I think San Diego, right? Yep. So without further ado, I just want to welcome Dr. Jonathan Mike. Dr. J. Mike, it's such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us today. Can't hear you. I think you might be on mute. Nope. You've got me, right? Let's see. How about now? Let's check it out. There you are. Are you there? Hmm. All right, I've got you now.
Okay, better.
There you are. You're loud and
All
clear.
right.
You were.
Okay. Okay.
I thought you
Good.
were because I was talking about SEAL training. You were starting to operate in covert mode on me. We're gonna have to do some hand signals.
Yeah, there you go.
I was
It's great. It's
waxing
great to.
philosophical about resilience and capabilities, and all of a sudden I had to really dial in to hear you.
Yeah, we can't be muted on this thing. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
great
can't
to
be
be
muted.
on. Yeah, it's great to be on, and I'm looking forward to talk about awesome stuff about performance recovery and where we're kind of headed, industry wise, and let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, if you saw a little bit yesterday, one of the things that I always love to do before we really start to get into some of the great things that you're doing, I want to know a little bit about you, and obviously for those of you that, as I mentioned yesterday, that when you watch this going forward and our guests going forward, I'm going to want to know about you a little bit. So I'd love to know, Dr. J, where did you grow up? You know, when did this passion for helping people become physically capable? When did that start to materialize in your life?
Sure. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, actually, and I did my undergrad and master's in exercise and sports science at Western Kentucky University. I was a strength and conditioning coach there for 2 years. I worked with baseball, softball, track, and swimming. And then I was at University of Louisville during my or post masters, worked mainly more with women's sports. And I was really never a academically inclined individual. I struggled a lot through school, middle school, high school, tutors, some few learning centers, and um, but for whatever reason, I always did really well in the sciences. And fast forward to college, I did not do well my first 2 years of college. Matter of fact, you're talking to a near college dropout, right now. My GPA after my sophomore year of college was, I think it was 1.7. And
Okay.
just to give people some reference, entry requirements for most colleges and universities nowadays is like around 2.5. GPA. Mine was like 1.7. So I was on the verge of pretty much dropping out of college. Luckily, we met some, really higher ups there, and it just the lights just kind of started to turn. The table started to really turn in terms of, here's the rock bottom. Now we have to kind of, climb our way out of it. I ended up majoring, of course, in exercise science in undergrad because I started really lifting in late high school, and I tell this story because most people just want to start working out because they just like want to get in shape, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. For me, it was. I remember I was at my parents' house, one night, and I turned on the TV, and at the time it was like WWF. They've been WWE for many years now, and I'm seeing all these dudes that
You're
are all
dating
jet.
yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
WWF.
Right. I've seen all these dudes, and actually the show that I watched at the time was actually live in like in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm seeing all these dudes like, man, they're all jacked. They're swole, like they're tanned or super athletic. And I was getting ready to go into college. So it was like, I want to actually do that. I want to, create like a bigger physical specimen, of myself, for confidence and all that. And this is before like I declare a major. So
Hmm.
that was really influential on me, at the time, and it still is in some capacities. Like I still watch it. We're huge fans of WWE. And then obviously, didn't do well first couple of years of college. And then basically I graduated, I think it was a 3.5, and then I matriculated right through to my graduate degree with a 3.8 for my master's. And then I was like, okay, like, what do I do next? So I was already, because the lights have already kind of turned on at a much higher level, I was already thinking about graduate level and PhD work before I even finished my undergrad. And so I ended up getting a full scholarship. This was after I worked at U of L. I ended up getting a full scholarship to the University of New Mexico for a PhD program. And then I
That's
was there
incredible.
from 2000. Yeah, I was there from 2007 to 2012 after I did my comprehensive exams, and then I went back to finish. I actually moved back to Louisville because at the time I was off scholarship, so I didn't really know what to do. So the idea was to do data collection and work a job someplace. And I ended up, you're going to laugh at this, I ended up being a substitute teacher for a year at elementary, middle, and high school just to get some extra money. Yeah, you can imagine, like, I mean, of course, I had hair then, and I was,
Okay.
a little bit more chunky.
Wait a second, you don't have hair now?
You're right.
Okay, all right.
So like it was interesting, being a substitute teacher for a little bit, and then so I ended up going back and moved back out to Albuquerque to finish 2.5 years later. I ended up finishing. It was very, very difficult. And then after that, I was assistant professor at Lindenwood University in St. Louis, on the west side of St. Louis, for 2 years. Taught undergrad and graduate courses. Lots of publications, some abstract. Worked a lot, with students and their projects. Then I was a visiting professor at University of Southern Mississippi. Taught undergrad and graduate courses. And then I moved out to Phoenix and taught at Grand Canyon University for 5 years. They just have undergraduate there. And then I transitioned over to the business and entrepreneur space. And now, fast forward later, we have our own coaching and consulting business. And of course, I have spoken, I think, since 2013. By the end of this year, I think it'll be 150 talks that I've done over the last 12 years. I've written 12 book chapters. I've been on dozens and dozens of podcasts. We've done courses in Singapore, sessions in Bangkok, Thailand. I was in Seoul, Korea last year. We have some other plans to do some other internationals next year. And I also attend events as well. So I don't just go to speak. I also attend other events, and I'm not a speaker, just so I can continue to network at high levels and be involved in industry things and organizations. So that is a long-term commitment, and something that I really love doing. Some people just like to go to the events and they speak and they leave, and I don't find anything personally wrong with that, but that's just not me. I like to go and meet people and be involved, and continue to find ways to innovate and adapt, and evolve over time. So, lots of ups and downs for sure. So I love it. I love what I do. I love bringing long-term value to, clients and athletes and even companies. And I like to think my experiences and exposures can speak to that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to. This is going to be super exciting. I want to harken back to something you said just a couple minutes ago, and it's related to you catapulting yourself from that 1.7, whatever that is. Was that it was 1.7?
Yeah, that's what I want. Way at 1.7 GPA.
Okay, all the way up to close to a 4.0. The reason I want to talk about that is, for me, that indicates something that we don't want to gloss over. So as an example, I was a average student in high school because I dedicated all of my time to running a kickboxing academy and being a fighter. I would go home, I'd drop my books at the door, I would then wake up the next morning and scramble to try to do my homework as I went off to school. By the way, for any kids out there, for some reason someone was hearing this, that's not the recommended recipe for success in school. But I was a C student, and I had doubts internally. I knew that I was more capable, but when you're not pushing and driving in a certain area, it can sow some seeds of doubt. And then when I went off to the Navy, and I was told that I could not go to SEAL training unless I kept my recruiter didn't tell me this, by the way. I obligated for 6 years, and he failed to tell me that when I went off to A school, which is military technical training, that if I didn't have a 90% or above, I'd lose my orders to SEAL training. Well, when I was told that gave me motivation. And then this kid who was a C student worked himself through that school to be the honor graduate. And for me, talking about opening my eyes up to what happens when you really push yourself. Did you have a similar, let's say bolt of energy and belief happen with you when you were able to take yourself up by your bootstraps and work yourself all the way up to that high?
Yeah, totally. I did. And I think, for me personally, and I'm sure others will, can relate to this in their own form or capacity. Up until I was in midpoint of my PhD, I really didn't ever learn how to truly study, because we are taught in terms of our educational system to just rote memorization, this is this, and this is this. And so the main reason I wanted to get a doctorate not just for the long-term opportunities and growth, was to become like a hybrid individual, like what I tend to call like a pracademic, somebody who can take the science and understand like the research side and put it into real world practical application terms and higher levels of practicality. And that's what to me is missing, and it still is missing,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the large framework of the educational, system. And so um, that was my whole point of wanting to, go through, the higher education in terms of getting my PhD. But yeah, there were definitely times to where because I didn't really like learning, and that's the point I want to make in terms of my, being younger. I didn't really like learning because I had not yet found something that I was like not only super passionate about, but something that drives fulfillment, drives commitment, drives purpose, and something that I can see myself being and becoming that's greater than myself. And I think that's a large distinction for people to make and listen to. Like you can have purpose. Like for example, I mean, excuse me, you can have passion about something. Like I'm passionate about playing the piano. I started out with drums, I went to guitar, and I still play piano. I play piano almost every single day. I'm passionate about that, but it doesn't make me any money. It doesn't make me a billionaire, like Elton John or Billy Joel. So not only do you have to find something you're passionate about, but what is something that is going to help accelerate you, financially, and something that's going to just give you more drive and purpose and meaning and fulfillment and contribution to the world or companies or organizations that's way bigger than yourself.
And as you were maneuvering through university and college and starting to, by the way, what was that term again?
Pracademic.
Pracademic. Okay, all right. So, any of us that ever can we grab it and borrow it and at least give you credit for
Yeah,
that because that's fantastic.
sure.
All right,
Yeah.
pracademic. I love it. I like to think in terms of little powerful phrases. So, with pracademology in mind, that we just termed a new word there. Um, as you were going through school and then starting to put some of the theory and the proven exercise science into helping people excel, the teammates, the players, the swimmers. Did you find that further lit and ignited your passion as you started to see what you were teaching and helping them with caused them to excel? And then maybe moments where they come and slap you five when they got excited because something you were helping them implement made a big difference in their overall performance?
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, that was something that I integrated very frequently in all the courses that I taught. Like, I'm not just up there like teaching the science stuff or the physiological components. Like, I'm integrating both from personal experience and professional experience. And it's probably helpful to say, like, I was a multi-sport athlete. Growing up, we did, baseball or basketball. We did tennis, swimming, did some, martial arts. And then once I got into my early PhD, I actually started to compete in the sport of strongman, actually. And I've done eight
Okay.
contests. I did 8 contests in the past, all top four. And I mean, I haven't competed in a number of years, but I would love, to be honest, I would love to actually do Masters division now because the weights are so much lighter, and I don't have to be, really, really, heavy, and I don't need to be like 300 pounds or whatever. Like, I can somewhat stay at my current, body weight, and at least hopefully try to perform, pretty well. So,
Is the
I come from it from a scientific, but also a multi-sport athlete and a competition experience as well, which is something that a lot of people don't really have. And so I like to think that I can provide a much deeper, deeper insight and value propositions and exposures to whoever I'm talking with. This could be general population, with the athletes, this could be students, this could be, companies, whatever it is. And so it makes people understand you more, and you can go in different directions and come up from different points of view, and just be more marketable.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, if you do get into the Masters division for strongman, if it's based on age, I hope you're not competing against Brian Shaw because I know he's getting up there in age, but he's still a
Right.
behemoth and he's still as strong as an ox. So,
Yeah.
or 5 oxes. If anybody
Of
knows anything
course.
about Brian Shaw. If you don't know anything about Brian Shaw, SHAW, go look him up. He's how many times did he win the strongman?
Four. Four.
Four. And that's when it was really starting to the competition level was really starting to rise.
Yeah, I mean, then he had his last. I know, obviously, know who he is. I think he had his last contest maybe like a year and a half or so ago. Like, and then he did some MMA stuff for a little bit to train that, and I think he wants to get into arm wrestling. So yeah, he's
doing some different things.
Yeah, what an awesome guy, you know.
Yeah, and obviously testing the limits of human performance, particularly with that level of strength. Now, no one's going to accuse this svelte young man of being a strong man by any time soon. All right, so I want to get into what you have started to, what you're doing lately, and that's the crux of what I wanted to talk about. And I saw one of your videos on LinkedIn. I think it was a couple of days ago, and as somebody who has spent decades trying to be creative and think outside the box and learn from experts and add it to my own routines to achieve higher levels of physical capability, I saw that video that you posted of, I think, one of the young ladies you were training, and it was with the prowler or the sled, and there was a elastic band or a physio band that was restraining the sled, and you were getting a few things there. You were getting some quality repetitions for her. She was getting snapback. You tell
Yeah.
what does your day-to-day look like when you're not speaking and you're actually one-to-one or one to a group training and teaching people?
Yeah, so the last few years, I've really been focusing on, starting more of the coaching and consulting business. When I first started speaking, I was speaking on a bunch of different things. Obviously, like the eccentric training stuff is a huge one for me because that was my PhD dissertation. I still speak on that.
For someone who may not be familiar with eccentric, tell us what that is specifically.
Sure. Well, the eccentric portion of a repetition is really like that like the active lengthening of fibers like under load. So think about the bicep curl. So this will be concentric. Coming down will be any type of the eccentric portion. So that's by definition is the active lengthening of fibers like under load. And then you can certainly get into like we can have a totally different discussion on this in terms of how or why and how much of an eccentric component really helps to increase overall strength and hypertrophy. And people will be surprised, although yes, it does help, and there's a certain amount of eccentric components involved in training. The concentric is certainly the main type of muscle contraction that gets you stronger with hypertrophy like over time. Not to say that eccentric doesn't. It's just like when you think of somebody who's really, really strong, they're not doing an entire workout based solely on eccentric activity. So that's and almost every single portion of the lift has an eccentric component, except for, of course, for isometric activity. So those are the three main muscle contraction types: concentric, eccentric, and then isometric.
Okay.
That was my PhD dissertation. We looked at the effects of eccentric contraction duration on force and strength and power output, and that was published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. It was in I think it was March of 2017, and it's been referenced hundreds and hundreds of times. It continues to get cited, and I've written some other articles since then. And I've spoken about it dozens and dozens of times on the speaking circuit. So that's kind of historically, what I talked about. I've also talked about, sleep things and supplements. I also did a lot of hands-on things about, deadlifting and squat and overhead press.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's one of those things in the industry to where like you can't be like the jack of all trades and kind of like master of none. And so the last couple of years, I've just like narrowed down the topics in terms of speaking. And one of the things that I've really focused on, in addition to some of the supplements and eccentric stuff, is really the power output things and integrating the higher levels of rotational power output, not only with my training, but the people that I work with. And of course, I post it on social and content and all that other stuff. And so what you're referring to is, in my recent sessions of training individuals, I will absolutely involve, rotational power aspects of training. So the example that you're referring to is, we have a sled, a prowler, and we hook up a band on the top of the piece where you actually load the weight, and that's hooked up to a machine, behind you. So yeah, you're actually pushing concentrically. You're getting horizontal force and horizontal, power output going forward on the concentric. But based on the resistance of the band, it will like recoil, kind of snap back at you again, depending on the band tension that you put on there. And of course, again, you're doing higher quality reps. You're focusing on concentric power output, but you also sometimes have to, depending on the band tension, you may have to physically kind of push it back towards you in order to continue the momentum with the concentric forward force or the horizontal power output. So those are just like a way to engage in forward propulsion going forward, forward push, horizontal power, but also add a little bit of creative, context, with that as well. So I've always been somebody who I love the foundational aspects of training and lifting, but I've also and always been someone who tries to make things a little bit more creative, not insane. Yes. Yeah, not insane, but just these really unique, creative ways to either make the exercise more effective or more challenging or more intense, but yet it's still highly realistic and highly practical.
Well, let's walk through with that in mind. I think that's a perfect segue into this video here. Let's walk through a lot of what's going on here because this is just a great little example of some of what you're articulating. Let's just check this out. We can explain to folks. Let's give it a play.
Okay, so this is what's called the tsunami bar, and so I told one of the gyms that I go to, I informed them that I would like to have this bar, and so this is what's called a tsunami bar. So the bar really doesn't weigh that much; it's probably like maybe 5 pounds, and so the whole point of this bar is to enhance what's called like reversal strength. Okay? And there's actually 6 levels of this bar. This is level 3. And so as you can see when you play the video, that the bar oscillates back and forth, coming up and coming down. And so one of the
when we
unique
get
things
to the down, that's a lot of force and power coming down. You have to really work to get that back up, right?
You do actually. And so the purpose is not just concentric force and speed, but with this particular type of bar, as the weight goes up, like as you put more weight on the bar, you actually have to physically pull the bar down towards you, which is complete opposite of a regular barbell. So this particular movement right here focuses on, this is just a dynamic, speed, bench press using the tsunami bar. And so I'm focusing on fast concentric and a faster eccentric component of that repetition. And so again, the main objective is to enhance concentric force and power output, but I also have to physically pull the bar down toward me in order to enhance the reversal strength.
I love it. And so obviously if an average J or an average Joe comes into a gym, they have a set of goals. But I think with the right bar, in my experience, the right bar at the right weight, this has immense value for even just an average Joe and average Jane. And what I love about work like this, assuming you've got the right bar, if you climb in weight, and then of course a more equipped athlete, if they themselves can even put more intensity into it, exercises like this are useful for the layman if they have right guidance, and then they're obviously useful for athletes. That's what I love about exercises like this.
Yeah, this is more. I would never put a beginner or even a lower level intermediate
not a beginner.
on this bar. This is more for a super high level intermediate and an advanced type of trainee.
Got it.
So again, and we can actually use this. Go ahead.
Is there a variation of this that, let's say someone's not a beginner, but let's say they've been to a boutique fitness facility and they've gotten a little bit of a base of fitness and flexibility, and they've started to learn how to train and recruit muscles. And I could see maybe at an intermediate level, somebody, if they had a bar that was, what's the lightest bar with exercise?
They all weigh pretty much the same, but the difference is
Okay.
this is level
Based on the weights.
3. Yeah, this is level 3. It goes up to level 6. The only difference is how much total
it.
weight that you can add. So you can also, I'm doing the bench press here, but I've actually done overhead press with this. I've squatted with
Okay.
this. I've done rows with this and various snatch movements.
Would you, assuming you had correct form, would you lunge with it?
Yes, absolutely. A forward lunge, but also Zercher lunge, which is basically like your arms like this and the bars going across this way. That's what's called like a Zercher squat or Zercher lunge. You can use that as well. So as you go forward in the lunge, the bar is going to sway and oscillate back and forth, which is going to enhance the overall stability requirements that you need in order to execute on the movement.
I love it. Let's take a look at the next video here. So very creative. What a great way to use the physio bands. I love that. Explain to us what you're working on with this video.
Sure. I'm actually doing a reverse explosive plyometric push-up here. So you can see I have the band attachments up in the rack, and I just kind of put them underneath my armpits. And I'm doing a push-up, but in this case, it's actually an explosive, push-up. And in most cases, you would just do, I've done this before on people that I've worked with, I would just do the explosive push-up part, not the actual leg and hip flexion, aspect, to that. It just adds another layer of component to that. But I would just do the push-up for normal individuals. And when I've done this before, people are really, and by the way, I only do this when I know that somebody can do a regular, like strict push-up. At least almost towards the floor, because this is just a higher level version in a higher level progression, if you will. This is a little bit more dynamic, obviously, than a regular push-up. And so when I'm doing this in the video that you're showing is I'm doing an explosive push-up. So I'm working on upper body plyometric explosive activity. But when I stomp the foot on the ground, like right there, then I can focus on some type of forward acceleration. This could be directly applicable to, sprinting, some, forward, aspect of, plays, or positions, for different types of players. This could be football related. This could be tennis related. Like it's all related in terms of the actual foot. And you also have a eccentric kind of deceleration that you have to overcome in this process as well. So if you play the video game, you see the explosive upper body push-up part, but you also see I have to kind of decelerate the foot like right at the top, in addition with the arm swing. So I'm working a lot of different types of components here. And so this is more focused on the concentric and the deceleration, and then less on the eccentric. So again, very creative way, but it's practical and very realistic.
So let's say, let's say a swimmer comes to you, and it's somebody who is, and there's different strokes, as you know, and I'm asking this because you've dealt with swimmers. Not every stroke you can master it the same way. Like some folks are more prone to being really good with the breaststroke. Some are great at freestyle. The butterfly is an incredibly demanding stroke. I know that personally because they would.
Me too.
They'd penalize us in SEAL training by making us have either water jugs or wet t-shirts and have to butterfly across the combat training tank, which was a pool. They call it a combat training tank. And so the butterfly. So if a swimmer comes to you and says, "Hey, the butterfly is something I really need to get better at," are there things you could do outside of the pool in a gym to help, let's say, at least get them to recruit some of the muscle groups?
Yeah. So what you're referring to is what's called dry land, training. So there's training that actually happens in the pool in terms of the technique itself of the skill of the actual strokes. And then you have the dry land training portion, as well. And most people don't realize this, but swimming, even though it's in the water, you can actually do a hell of a lot more volume in the pool than you can on land. Because you don't have to deal with effects of, of gravity and force as much in the pool versus on land. And so what people don't realize is that swimming, especially, it's actually a very large rotational sport, because as you move your hand stroke. Like if you're going to freestyle, you don't just come over like with your shoulder. You have to reach and then rotate and pull. Okay? In order to go through the water, in order to propel yourself through the water at higher rates of force and speed. Even flip turns, for example, involve aspects of rotation. And so every stroke, especially with a freestyle and backstroke, and especially butterfly, there's aspects of rotation involved. It doesn't look like there is because most people don't see the person in the water. Like you're not in the water at the same time you're looking at somebody swim. Only when you're in the water, say with a camera, you can see the person that there's actually quite a bit of rotation. So what I would do with swimmers is really focus more on aspects of rotation, anti-flexion, anti-rotation, but also dynamic speed and rotation, as well, moving in different planes of motion. We have sagittal plane, we have frontal plane, and we have, of course, transverse plane. And I've always been a huge advocate of transverse plane, which is training in rotation, because if you can train more in transverse plane or rotation, you will see that your strength in your frontal plane, your side to side, and sagittal front to back will actually go up as a result of you training higher aspects of rotation. Same thing with golf. Same thing with tennis. Tennis is a perfect example. Pretty much everything that you see in tennis is rotation based, along with higher levels of conditioning, aerobic activity, higher aerobic base, and even anaerobic power outputs, short bursts of activity, but also like longer durations too. So the amount of training involved in tennis is quite a bit. Now, it may not be as involved as say like MMA, but it's still, tennis is a perfect example of like a highly rotational sport that requires strength and speed and agility, but also a higher amount of aerobic base and anaerobic types of conditioning. And it's really, it's funny because, you're a former athlete, and I know you still train, performance. And I find it really odd that people don't think that these sports involve high levels of rotation, but sometimes you have to actually physically do it yourself in order to really truly understand how it feels.
Yes. And that leads me to something. This is an interesting pathway here. In my experience, so when I harken back to when I was on the SWAT teams and a Baltimore police officer, and I was also simultaneously, I was working with the National Guard. I was there with their recruit sustainment program, and I was their physical fitness readiness coordinator, responsible for every person that wanted to go into the National Guard. I was responsible for getting them ready. So for me, in my experience, the practical aspect, being a student myself of the way that the body moved and subjecting myself to certain protocols and training regimens and exercises, was immensely important to my ability to help other people succeed. There's the academia side that's really important, but I've found that the theory and the proven science, there's also added value when not only do you know it because you've studied it, but like you just said, you yourself have put yourself up under some of those regimens. And it's the old saying, tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll understand.
Right. That's awesome.
So have you found that your personal experience, in addition to your incredible academic background, has been also one of your key factors in helping other people excel at a higher level?
Oh, it has, and I think that's something that, and there are other people like that I know in the industry as well. But yeah, there's no doubt that my academic, background and my ability to relate to competition and have competition experience creates just a different and higher level, of value and connection to people that you really work with. And I found it to be something that has helped me succeed more like over time, the last several years. And I am somebody who I just, if I don't get in the gym, like if I go 3 or 4 days without getting in the gym, like you probably don't want to be around me. So that's how much it's just so much a part of who I am, my identity and my DNA. honestly, I have no idea who I would be or what I would be doing if I did not work out and do any kind of thing with performance.
Yeah, and you're delving into an aspect of these industries that we're in, and I say these plural for a reason, because they're all converging now, intersecting at various levels: wellness, recovery, fitness, physical performance. You could say that's the same thing because they're closely related. One can lead to the other. Diagnostics. I'm having Jeff Zweifel on next Tuesday, the day after Labor Day. Jeff Zweifel is the former president and COO of Lifetime Fitness. He launched Miura, which is their wellness approach inside of Lifetime. And he, speaking of books, he's written a chapter in a book. But it's that challenge to try to basically create a thread through all of these aspects of making someone whole and effective and um,
Yeah, I
just
can, and I know where you're kind of going with this, which is a good segue to talk about the recovery aspect.
yes.
But like at super high levels of competition, I'm talking about, the top level NBA players, NHL, MLB, football. These individuals, like this is like their whole lives, right? I mean, their whole lives are like, the sport and competition and winning. And so you're going to spend not only as much time with training, but you're going to spend an equal amount of time, if not more time over the course of the year on aspects of recovery. And some of these people, and I don't know the exact number, but I'm willing to bet that they spend hundreds of thousands, maybe in the low millions on recovery. And this can include supplements. This can include strategies and tactics, for recovery. Like it is a big deal. And people don't really understand how recovery works. I'm happy to talk about that, as well, because I know you like that
Yeah, no,
stuff too.
we need to get into it because I would be remiss if we didn't, because that's again just from personal experience and then experience through having trained hundreds of people. And yes, can you perform at a high level if you don't know how to train? Absolutely not. Could you perform at a high level if you knew how to train and didn't necessarily, for a particular period of time, delve into recovery? You could for a particular period of time. High level is relative. There's going to be a drop off if you don't add recovery to your overall balance. There will be a drop off for sure. So we have to get into it. Not the least of which
Yeah,
is our company is literally a wellness and recovery company. We
right.
have the only modality in the world that addresses respiratory health naturally, so it'd be silly to not talk about recovery. Um, so, thinking in terms of recovery, I love the way you just termed it. Well, here's what I've discovered, and I'll open it up to you, Dr. Mike. And I put this saying out today, and I was responding to someone's post. In many things, there's a small difference, but that small difference can make a big difference in overall performance and longevity. And I look at recovery not as a small difference per se, but the degree to which someone uses red light therapy to reduce inflammation, near infrared especially, to reduce inflammation and in the musculature and in and around tendons and ligaments and increase collagen. Those are big differences, but they're little small incremental differences that can, when they're added up, they can make a big difference in how quick you can get back on the bike or in the pool or in the gym or back on the field to perform at a higher level. If someone has a greater cardiovascular capacity, let's say every time we breathe 20 to 22,000 times a day automatically. And as athletes, we know when we're really putting ourselves under duress, we're putting a lot of stress on the respiratory system to get as much oxygen in and get CO2 out as quickly as possible. Modalities like halotherapy that can help your lungs get more oxygen in and get more CO2 out with greater efficiency. Those are smaller differences that can make a huge difference over time. So with recovery in mind and thinking about those differences, those percentage points we can grab, how important has that been with the athletes you've seen, and where do you see that going as we continue to evolve with recovery and wellness?
Yeah, good points. I think that I would say one of the biggest things that people need to understand about recovery. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay. What I would say, what's important to understand is that, like, what is the definition of recovery? Because our industry and people love to talk about recovery like it's a single entity, like it's just one thing
Yes.
and nothing else. And that's not the case at all. If you look at a more of a tried and true definition of recovery, there's different types of recovery, but I'm talking more in this particular one about the physiological definition of recovery. It is basically a physiological repair state to take somebody from more fatigue to a stage of less fatigue or no fatigue. Okay?
I love
In
it.
other words, it's a reestablishment of an exerciser. This could be a client or an athlete to a renewed or a higher ability of baseline performance than what they previously were. And this goes back to a lot
That's
of
such a great
60s.
distinction.
Yeah,
Oh, let's
this
seize
goes
on that because recovery and
this goes
repair aren't
back
necessarily
to
the same thing. I love
a
it.
lot of research from like the 60s and 70s from like Zasyorsky and some of the Russian, coaches. And it's a term based off like super compensation, to where you take an athlete at a mere baseline level over a period of several weeks to several months. They do the testing, they do their training, they're adapting to that new stimuli, and then you retest, and now they should be at a higher baseline level than what they previously were. Right? So during that time, over the course of several weeks to several months, they have physiological adaptation like across the board. Like this is neuromuscular adaptation, this is cardiovascular, this is respiratory, this could be immune. All the systems of the body grow and adapt over the course of several weeks and several months. And so that's what recovery really is from like a physiological definition. Okay. So the establishment of an exerciser, a client, athlete, this could be general population, this could be tactical, for example, is getting them to a renewed ability to exceed a previous level of performance. That is the definition of recovery from a physiological perspective. Then you have other aspects of recovery, say like glycogen recovery, protein synthesis recovery. You also have recovery from a sports supplements, perspective, which I'm a huge fan of sports supplements.
Yeah, you're
I could talk
sparking
about
all kinds of thoughts and ideas because I do want to get into supplementation, diagnostics to determine
yeah,
perhaps what types of peptides or hormone therapies would be useful, things like that. This is really important because this is where this is cutting edge. It may not be cutting edge to you, but it's cutting edge to most people now. Um, it's like an aircraft carrier that's slowly changing course and heading in true north now, and
right.
finding all of these additional ways to recover and repair. So real quick, let's not gloss over sleep because that's probably the number
Yeah,
one thing. I saw Kathleen Ferguson, who I know you connected with recently. She put a great post out yesterday. By the way, follow Kathleen Ferguson, everybody, if you don't know who she is. She's the CEO and founder of Coach 360, but she put out a great post on sleep and the importance of sleep. I know in Hell Week there was only one thing that was going to help us recover and repair, and that was sleep. Those 4 hours of sleep over those 6 days, because you get 4 hours total, they were gold. So let's talk about sleep, and then we can get into supplementation and maybe diagnostics and peptides.
yeah. I think if you look at some of the there's a lot of factors that affect recovery, and I'm just touch on some of the sleep is really one of them. And I would say, and I talked about sleep, earlier in my speaking career, and so typically sleep is something that people talk about like it's overrated, meaning like, yeah, for example, everybody knows that you need to sleep like 7 to 9 hours a night, but it's not even really, it's less about quantity and more about quality and getting into like deep REM sleep, and making sure that the brain waves are getting the stimuli that they actually really need in order to facilitate growth and repair regeneration, and alpha waves and delta waves and omega waves and all that type of stuff, from a neuroscience, perspective. And so to me, like it's less about quantity and more about quality. I know people that can sleep 4 to 6 hours a night and still perform at a high level. For me personally, like I need, 7 to 9. I typically average, per night. I have my own specific, bedtime routine. And I would tell you that if you don't travel a lot, it is really, if you do not travel a lot And if you have a sleep or bedtime routine, you're pretty much golden. Once you elicit travel into your routine, this could be domestically or internationally, there's a lot of strategies and tactics that you can use to try and offset that as much as possible. You can't totally prevent it. But one of the things that certainly affects sleep in terms of the circadian rhythm responses are time zone shifts. And going from, for example, like West Coast to East Coast. Well, when you fly from Southern California to New York, it's like, it's a 5-hour flight, but you have to leave at 6 a.m., West Coast time in order to get to East Coast in a decent hour. And by the time you get there, like it's dinner time, and then you're going to want to go to sleep. Versus like if you go to East Coast to West Coast, well, you can go late morning or early afternoon, and you can kind of extend the day, if you will.
That's right.
So that's something that people really have to contend with. But not only is it just travel, it's work shifts as well. Okay, if someone works the graveyard shift, or hospital workers, even police and SWAT, for many years. And so you have to contend with the sleep schedule, like firefighters, for example. There's like 24 hours on, or 48 hours on, 24, 72 hours off, or something like that. So you have to contend with not only those time zone shifts, but work shifts as well.
All right, we'll see if Dr. Jonathan Mike comes back on. He probably hit a button. If he doesn't come back on within 1 minute or 2 minutes, we'll go ahead and in there, since we're 51 minutes in. So we were getting into good stuff. We might have to have a part 2 with Dr. Jonathan Mike. So for me, this delving into physical performance, it really is passion. And I'll have to say that those of you that are, in my networks, hold on 1 second, Dr. Jonathan Mike, that this is your passion, and you guys are helping people through fitness and wellness and recovery. You guys are inspiring, and all of you that are doing your part, I just want you to know that your content and your passion and your expertise doesn't go unnoticed. And that's the whole reason for this series, is to try to cut through the anonymity that we have with LinkedIn and the shallow connection, and to have these more substantive conversations. I'm glad you're back, Dr. Jonathan Mike. So you were really getting into some good stuff. So I want to make sure that we push forward, flesh this out a little bit more.
Sure. I was talking about time zone shifts.
Yep.
And like workers, graveyard shift workers, hospital workers, police officers, firefighters, like they have to contend with like major sleep issues depending on what their schedule depending on what their schedule is like, and it can change. It's not always like a consistent thing. And so you have time zone shifts that you have to contend with. You also have specific types of positions that I just mentioned, tactical officers, nurses, traveling nurses, doctors, all those types of occupations and endeavors and careers have various types of not only sleep schedules, but how it can either positively or negatively impact their performance, their cognitive performance, mental performance, their physical performance. And outside, well, not really outside, but there's the 3 components that people have to contend with when it comes to training is the physical, the mental, and the technical. And there's a hidden 4th, and that's the emotional. Because
Yes.
if you have high emotionality, okay, like your ability to make decisions, executive decisions, that will affect your mental state. If your mental state is here, there, and everywhere, well, then you're going to have much harder time shifting your focus to either the technical side, okay, and this could be with whatever job, the technicality or skill of that job, but it would also affect the physical, right? So just because, like, if you're tired, if you have bad sleep, well, that's absolutely going to affect your mental side and your emotional state as well. So in other words, if one is affected, they're pretty much all affected. So trying to find a relative consistent balance of the 3 or the hidden 4 is something that almost everybody has to contend with, regardless of who they are, regardless of athlete, regardless of occupation. Of course, you also have age as well, which is a huge factor for recovery. Like younger individuals, 20 to 25, they can pretty much go into the gym, start their bench press at 225, and literally do like 0 warm-ups. Okay,
I remember those days.
yeah, somebody like myself, I mean, I'm 43 and I have to take, 20 minutes, for active warm-ups. And focusing more on those, and then,
Yep.
boost
What would you
training
say?
recovery.
So with that, this is great, right? So you're 43, I'm 53. Quick, quick question about that. So that's a huge difference. I remember being in my 20s, like you said, I could just literally pop off the couch and run a sprint, not worrying about tearing a hamstring, good to go. Hit my 30s, that was still good to go. 40s, like you said, I needed to warm up significantly to get a really good training session. And when someone hits their 50s, what I love about the way we train now, and if you've made a lifestyle of performance and fitness, and you eat well and get your, you recover and repair, you can still be fairly high level in your 50s. Um, but that being said, for me, it seems like I need to, if I'm really going to have a great training session or compete well, I need to warm up, and work my way into that session over the course of 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, a total of a 2 to 2.5 hour training time, like in the gym. 30 minutes of that could be like for your thorough warm-ups. For
What
upper
would you say
body,
to
lower.
somebody who, as they advance that they advance in age, with that in mind, because this is such a great point? What would you say to somebody who, as they advance in age, and I'm guilty of it, we say to ourselves, "I only have an hour to work out, or I only have 90 minutes, or whatever it is," and we say, stretching and warming up, I don't have time." What would you say to that person?
I would actually say that focus on strategic mobility patterns, rotation, and
Okay,
lower skill, kind of like power output types of, you know movements. This could be things with bands. This could be, you know, upper and lower body mobility patterns, rotational patterns, internal, external rotation, small and muscle group aspects, basic movements. It could be like RDLs. You could pick 3 to 5 exercises and go 2, 3 rounds of circuits, with that, or high
okay,
intensity
great.
types of circuits, or metabolic, types of training. So something like that where you're basically blending the mobility and the power output, together in order to enhance like training density. So you're kind of doing more work in less time. And you can at the same rate, you can also get aspects of aerobic and anaerobic, conditioning, with them as well. So that's what I would say, and it's going to be customized and individualized, to the person. There's some times where, like, if I'm traveling or I'm doing whatever, like, I have to do my warm-ups, but I may have to cut out something in the training session because I lack the time. And I love having the same amount of time in my training sessions, but there's some occasions where, like, okay, I have to cut this out because I'm just low on time, but I'll add it back in the next training session.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and I would assume that your advice would be when someone's traveling. By the way, I'll add that I love traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast way more than I love traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast for the reasons that you mentioned. I love gaining time. I hate losing time. I'm heading out to Alaska to, provide a consult for a hospitality asset out there. We're going to be helping
Nice.
them expand their wellness and recovery room. And suffice it to say, I'm going to be gaining, I think, 4 or 5 hours when I go, but I'll be
Yep.
losing that when I come back 5 days later. Um, let's get into this this diagnostic side, which can ultimately lead into the value of peptides, supplementation generally and broadly, potentially some hormone replacement therapy. As we're continuing to strive for higher levels of physical and human performance, how valuable do you view understanding what's going on inside of you and then tailoring a supplementation program to that?
Yeah, I think because I'm a big fan of supplements, and I like some of the GLPs. I'm not the world's expert in it, yet, so I'm still reading about that specific aspect as well. But I love sports supplements. It's helpful to mention that sports supplements come in 3 types of categories. I mean, there's different types of supplements, right? But they ultimately kind of do, like, they work all the same. And the broader picture is sports supplements are used to help accelerate, faster recovery from, exercise, sessions, right? That's how they're really used. Like people just don't take supplements because they just want to take them. Like there's a reason for that. And the main reason is to accelerate the recovery process, but also have an advantage, a greater advantage for performance. And this could be everything from decreases in body composition. This could be strain. This could be hypertrophy. This could be like on the micronutrient level. This could be fish oils. This could be vitamin D. Like all those types of things. So to accelerate recovery, the other thing is how that works is supplements are used as a strategic way to, or not a strategic way, but they're used because of what's called exercise-induced muscle damage, which is caused by mechanical stress, mechanical loading that invokes some type of inflammatory response. This inflammatory response and mechanical stress and mechanical loading are real life physiological facts. This is not an opinion, right? So the inflammatory response from exercise is a real thing. It happens all the time. It happens even if you don't think that it's actually happening. And so it's exercise-induced muscle damage. There's also, muscle soreness. Not quite the same thing, but they're used kind of synonymously. And then the other way supplements are used is to take those supplements to enhance the anti-inflammatory aspect and the antioxidant properties to significantly reduce exercise-induced muscle damage or muscle soreness. So they're used across a broad spectrum, and there's different supplements that do different things. Then you can get into the specific types of supplements, or the broader term would be called ergogenic aids or performance enhancing supplements. This could be supplements. This could also be drugs, as well, whether legal or illegal. And so I've always been a big fan of supplements. And I think that in terms of between now and the next 2 to 5 years, you're going to see, in terms of innovation in the health and fitness space and the wellness space, you're going to see more customized and individualized supplement, regimens, if you will, whether the person is very educated on supplement clarity, like ingredient education, such as, I like to think myself as one of those individuals. But you're also going to see aspects of more deeper insights, such as like brain gut health components as well. You're also going to see things that, although we have them now, the nutritional software and components, you're going to see things that go beyond just like macronutrients and micronutrients. I believe that you're going to see how specific data points and the resistance training regimen can be used in those platforms to help improve body composition markers and biomarkers. And you're also going to see, I believe, at a deeper level than that, perhaps those software programs and technology to be used for epigenetic testing and mitochondrial function or even mitochondrial dysfunction to help offset or combat sarcopenia and age-related muscle loss. So that's kind of where I see some, that's kind of where I see some of the things going in terms of like the supplements, the recovery, the performance, and kind of having all these things like interwoven together in order to create like a maximum level of like human machine.
Yeah, I love it. And when you get into the cellular enhancements, that's critical. It's why every biohacker, both those that are operating on solid science or those that are, delving into pseudoscience, but their goal is always the same, is they start to latch on to the reality that, again, wouldn't it be great if we live forever? We won't, but it'd be great if we did. But can we affect how vibrant we are, and can we impact our quality of life, not just conceptually, but can it actually happen? And the answer is abundantly clear that it is yes, especially when we start to take care of ourselves with respect to enhancing cellular health. To think about the fact, it's the whole reason we breathe. We breathe to get oxygen in so that the body can, I know you know all this, but for those that may not think about it, we get oxygen in so that oxygen can be used as a reactant to convert glucose to ATP so that ATP can run the mitochondria with efficiency. And so there's that, and then there's a whole host of other practices and supplements and perhaps medicines. Jeff Zweifel is going to get into some of that can affect cellular health. I don't, Gary Brecka made a bold statement. He's obviously a biohacking expert, but he made a bold statement. He believes we could get to the point where we could get to 150 years. Well, assuming that could be done while you're still vibrant, I'm on board for that. So, but as
Yeah,
far as just peeling it back, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Oh, so but as far as just peeling it back to what is the here and now for the average athlete, or even just the high level athlete, what are the go-to must-have over-the-counter supplements that don't require diagnostics? That if you don't have it, you're leaving something on the table. I
Okay.
I'm thinking creatine, protein, but let's talk about some supplements that maybe even beyond those that we should be thinking about.
I think every person in the world should be taking creatine year round, actually. And I personally know and am friends with some of the top creatine researchers and sports supplement people in the nation. And I take creatine, all the time. I've been taking it for years. So creatine and protein, those are pretty much givens. I would say caffeine. The thing about caffeine I would love to talk a whole different segment on like just supplements and supplement education and ingredient clarity. I think that would be like a fantastic topic.
Yeah, love it. We can even
One of the
reconvene and
things,
talk about that.
yeah, one of the things about caffeine, and I'm talking more about from a pre-workout, perspective, not just having a cup of coffee. There is a difference between coffee and caffeine. Actually, most people don't know that. And from a pre-workout perspective, there's three ingredients that is in pretty much every single pre-workout. This is either a drink or this is a powder, regardless of company. Is creatine, beta alanine, and caffeine, or derivatives of caffeine. This could be like yohimbine. This could be green tea. Extract. This could be guarana. Whatever it is. So every single pre-workout has those three ingredients. To a degree, and typically caffeine, in terms of its maximum ergogenic or performance enhancing effect, needs to be somewhere like in the 3 to 6 milligrams per kg. So, for example, you take your body weight divided by 2.2, you're in kilograms, and you times it by 3, and that's how much, relative speaking, that you need to be taking caffeine that's relative to your body weight. So, for me, that would be about 3 to 3.5 cups of coffee in order for me to maximize the ergogenic effect of that substance while and during my training sessions. For somebody else, it could be like maybe a cup. So it's relative to body weight, of course.
And then what does that caffeine help the athlete do during their session?
So it does a number of things, actually. It's been known to enhance fatty acid metabolism, for example, but it's mainly used to increase aspects of strength markers, high intensity types of training. Fundamentally, in terms of physiologically, it's a stimulant. It is a stimulant on the central nervous system. It increases what's called catecholamine production, or epinephrine, norepinephrine, aka like adrenaline. It's also a vasoconstrictor as well, so it does increase blood pressure. Physiologically, that's what it does. There's so much research on caffeine and creatine. I mean, particularly creatine, and there's well over 1,000 studies done on creatine. The most of it has been done either a combination of performance, but also clinical markers, as well. It's been used for older adults. It's been used for, I believe, Alzheimer's patients, immune markers. So it's really done a very good job of running the gamut through all levels of performance. So caffeine, creatine. There's also beta alanine, as well. Creatine and caffeine actually do the exact same thing, like physiologically, but beta alanine has to be 4 to 6 grams a day. So the dose is.
All right. So Dr. Jonathan Mike, we're going to be wrapping this here shortly. I'm sure he'll pop on in 1 minute, but he's obviously getting into some of the staples. And I asked him, what are the staples? If you weren't doing diagnostics, what do you have to absolutely have? And of course, I knew where he was going to head. Caffeine was one of the ones I was focusing on, but it was really going to be creatine and protein. And I personally have benefited mightily from creatine. I've been taking it for a number of years, but religiously over the last year or so, and it's worked wonders. And not all creatine is created equal. And then, of course, there's protein. That's really important. And then depending on body weight and your exercise regimen, protein is it's a very important supplement. I think everybody knows that by now. But the question becomes, when do you use protein? Yes, between meals. It's the old adage of perhaps when you wake up, depending if you're training regularly, in the afternoon, and then in the evening, and then at various times between meals. But then there is this aspect of taking protein where you would, and I'm going to ask Dr. Mike this, you would take protein at least within 30 minutes after you train rigorously. What do you think about that, Dr. Jonathan Mike? We hear that where we don't know if it's just something that's thrown out because it's backed in science, but just conceptually, it seems to make sense that if you train heavily, rigorously, within 30 minutes of that workout, what's a good barometer to get protein in your system?
You're talking about protein post-workout?
Yep.
Okay, so the traditional myth of taking, I joke about this when I talk about sports supplements in recovery. People think, and people still think like this, and this is more of like the younger crowd, people that may not be as well versed like in the science aspect, and that's okay. You can still learn and adapt and update your knowledge. People think if I don't consume my protein shake 30 minutes at post workout,
yes.
and if I don't consume it 23 minutes and 37 seconds, then I lose all my gains, and everyone is going to unfollow me, and nobody likes me anymore.
Oh Lord, that's the influencer generation.
Right.
Don't tell me you have a ring light in the gym.
Yeah, no, that is I don't.
Okay.
That is just complete utter BS. It's all nonsense.
Okay.
In fact, protein consumption post exercise can still happen even within an hour. So it's not the short anabolic window that people used to think it is. It's more like a really big garage door nowadays.
Got it.
So you can still have your protein within an hour post exercise, and you can still increase aspects of protein synthesis, glycogen replenishment, and still be well within the confines of added recovery.
Is there truth to? Again, everything is case by case. But again, you also, one of the ones you also hear frequently over the last couple of decades is a pound of or a gram of protein per pound of body weight, right? Don't know where that. So what's let's say someone like me, 185, walking around. I step on the scale 185 again, and I say to you, hey, Dr. Jonathan Mike, I just want to focus on not necessarily athletic prowess and ability. I want to gain muscle mass. I want to do it without a lot of body
fat. Get lean, yeah.
Get lean, all that. Assuming I'm training correctly and all that. What would be a nice, and eating a well-balanced meal, what would be a nice supplement regimen to help to facilitate that?
For the protein aspect, it's pretty general. So like a gram per pound of body weight, but there's obviously some great protein researchers like Stu Phillips who talk about, for athletes, I've seen anywhere from like 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kg. I've also seen 1.8 up to like 2.3. In fact, one of my good friends, Dr. Joey Antonio of International Science Sport Nutrition, has published numerous research on higher protein consumption in terms of 2.3 grams and also like 3.3 or 3.4 grams per kg. Now that study was really short. It was like about 4 or 5 weeks. He also did like it was 2.3, and even the higher protein consumption over a short period of time. No negative effects on liver or kidney markers. No negative effects on brain, but positive and no negative impacts on bone actually. But everything positive in terms of increased muscle mass, increase in lean body mass, and decreases in body composition. So if you're looking for whatever macronutrient that you need to be consuming more on a regular basis to get lean, it's protein by far.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, is there a correlation between that's just protein generally and broadly throughout the day, meaning your meals have protein, you have protein supplements? Good. What about that distinction?
Yeah, good question. It is more important to have protein consumption more throughout the day and the total amount than how much you have per meal. Okay? That makes sense. So for example, like for me, I easily consume my minimum is 200 grams of protein a day. even though I float between 270 and 275, my minimum is 200. And so
Okay.
if somebody, for example, and we don't have to use me as the example, if somebody is, 150 pounds, okay, well, that comes out to like 40 to 50 grams of protein per meal across 3 meals, right? Now, some people think that's really hard to do, and I don't believe that it is. It's only hard because they haven't done it and haven't been committed to doing it. 40 to 50 grams per meal. I mean, if you look at your average protein shake has 25 grams. So that's 25 grams right there. Most higher yogurts, for example, or Greek yogurts have around 15. So now you're just from those two things alone, now you're at 50. A 6-ounce chicken breast has about 55 grams of protein, right? So you can it doesn't have to be one specific type of protein. It can be a combination of proteins as long as you're getting 40 to 50 grams, per meal. So 40 to 50 grams for 3 meals. I mean, you fit your protein requirements, throughout the day, just right there. So what really matters is protein throughout the day and how much that you can have, per meal versus, not getting it in it at all. So I'm just trying to break this down into easily actionable steps so people can understand how this really works. It's more important to get protein in for each meal and throughout the day versus, I got to have 3 shakes a day and like 1 meal a day, bro.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I've never been a fan of that approach.
Right.
And I personally, of course, have experienced those benefits where, you have that healthy, well-balanced approach to getting your meals in throughout the day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then, of course, the old adage of, I'll pop a protein shake in the morning, eat my breakfast, I'll train, protein, good lunch, some protein, good dinner, some protein before I go to sleep. For me, that's always been a nice little cadence, but of course it depends on the person. I've never tried to be a bodybuilder, so that's a whole different beast and animal. I guess someone like Brian Shaw probably needs to get on that 3+ gram of protein program that you were mentioning. So you're frozen now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up. If you can still hear me, Dr. Jonathan, Mike, there's so much obviously that we could get into. Yes, absolutely. I'd love to take you up on the offer of another session down the road where we really delve into supplementation, nutrition, and the ways that we can help the body have the resources and the fuel that it needs to perform at a high level. I want to thank anybody who's going to look at this or has looked at this now, might be watching now, or maybe watching it down the road. And for those of you that are going to be joining this program soon, I'm looking forward to talking to you, getting into your stories, hearing about your passions, learning about your insights, and really just talking shop. Next up, tomorrow is Ryan Vesey. Ryan Vesey is the co-founder and CEO of Matterhorn Fit, and he has the Matterhorn method. They're a growing franchise. Ryan Vesey will get into his story, what led him into playing professional hockey, how the Matterhorn method was developed. A lot of that ties back into some of the injuries that he experienced and how he was able to play injury-free based on some of the disciplines and protocols and their approach. And I'm really excited about tomorrow's talk with Ryan Vesey. And you guys have a great, let's say, Wednesday, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great day, everyone.